This is Kia Bamba song. We run the whole of Switzerland and the whole of Europe. And we run the whole of etc, etc. You don't know, devil shaman says something, I bat them to the max. And it's like some idiot someone want to stop them from get a piece of the pie. Well, I'm to no disrespect, gonna go and die. Yeah, me now. Kia Bamba, them have dubs, we play fast, I play slow, them have flows. Like nobody knows, them kill soul, na sound.
Welcome to Only Friends on the Power Deck, your one-stop spot for all things snow, mountain, travel. Get all you need to know about epic destinations, inspiring stories from local legends all around the globe, as well as creators, entrepreneurs, brands, owners, and more. We are here to talk about what's hot, what's changing the game, what's incoming. Come along for the ride and let's froth out and have fun doing it. Yep. So today we have the man, the myth, the legend, Buff Dis.
Thanks for having us on, mate.
You and I met here randomly at the podcast home at school drop-offs. We were sussing each other out, looking at Burton jumpers, looking at Nike shoes, trying to work out how we could connect and have a beer. And it ended up with here painting the background here once we did finally connect. It took a bit of time, but we got there.
Thanks for having us on, mate.
It's my pleasure, mate. So I guess to start off, we're just going to talk a bit about Hugh's snow story, which when we first met, we didn't really know. We both had a snow story and obviously led to the background, plenty of beers and banter over good times. So, Buff this, I'd love for you to please tell us a little bit about your snow story and how you got here and the crossroads that led you to doing other things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've had a fairly sort of similar experience with the snow like you had, coming from Adelaide, like not too many mountains about. And then in Melbourne, like my family weren't skiers or anything, so I was a bit late to the game. And it was funny because I think the best way I can put it is that I've been skating for a while. And then luckily, like a cousin relative invited me up to Mount Buller for just a day. Had a quick day, loved it. Like it was the best thing ever. Then the next year we went up and I had like another 2 days. And then someone somehow said there was a squad that you could get into. And if you did that, then you didn't have to do sport at school.
So I guess for you, snowboarding was a bit like skating, but you're attached to the board, which made sliding on rails and a whole bunch of things a hell of a lot easier. And there's always been a huge transition, especially in the earlier days from what? I'm attached.
And it was great. It was so fast and like immediately I loved it. And the funny thing is my mate, who's sort of a second cousin, I'd only been snowboarding for about 3 days and he'd had like maybe a couple of days more. And to get into this squad, we had to pretend that we'd been snowboarding for 3 years. So yeah, it was a bit of a bluff game to get into it, but I loved it so much it was worth it.
Yeah. And I guess back in those days, we're probably talking, how old were you then?
I must have been like 14 or around that.
So probably 25 years ago?
Well, yeah, geez, we are that old. Like his late 90s, around that.
Yeah. So I guess at that point, the rail game of skiing didn't really exist much at all, but the snowboarding scene of that kind of stuff was quite small. And if you had a bit of experience on a skateboard, you had a really good basis to pick it up. So what happened next, mate?
Well, I mean, I think one of the reasons I loved it so much was because it was still that time where you guys, skiers, didn't want us there. And for me as like a skater back in the day, like, skating around the city, all the workers didn't want you there. And like with graffiti, nobody wants you there. And so it really felt like, that's exactly where I felt comfortable.
Yeah.
But you're in the most amazing environment, away from the city, away from anyone, it's such an escape. And yeah, I think it was just that transition where it was, I think the mountains realized that it was a really profitable thing to, allow.
Yeah.
And then I was just that time when they were fostering it a bit more. And so quite lucky.
Yeah. So yeah, I couldn't agree with that kind of vibe more with, mountains just did feel like freedom, especially if you were stuck in a city and, trying to weave your way through the concrete jungle to all of a sudden be out in this fresh air where you're not having to run away from people and security guards to slide things.
So you could still find that up in the mountain if you really want to, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely on the bit of the urban side. But so what happened here? Tell us how you cracked the code with this 3 year in 3 days.
Yeah, I was lucky, I think. I mean, I think a few of so the way I put it is that like my family weren't skiers. And so there was a few crew that I knew from my school or, they're all, from similar areas, but they were all pretty rich and had, chalets and had all of that sort of stuff. And me and my mate were like the ones that were sort of staying at an uncle's in-laws sort of place. And the code was cracked because I think with the skating I did, but it was also the gymnastics. So all that stuff came really easy. And then I was able to bluff my way through with the coaches and stuff like that, pretending I had all that time up there.
Yeah, I think it's funny that's now become a huge basis for modern day part and pipe.
Yeah. And I hate it. It's funny, the thing that actually allowed me to do it and sort of, the thing that I was best at, the hucking, is actually the thing I hate watching now. But yeah.
But yeah, that's how a lot of countries which didn't have the experience, the basis which your European or your Canadian and North American zones had, they've progressed so quickly because they've gone and put gymnasts and whatnot and said, here, spend all day on this ramp or in this artificial zone and work it out. So what happened next, Matt? We're intrigued.
Well, I guess the best way I can put it is I got good enough that I was able to do it, got flow from different stores and rode for like, K2. And for a little bit, it was my dream to be able to be a pro snowboarder and live from it. And, I started doing competitions. And the thing that I really loved about the snowboarding was actually a really private thing. Actually, sort of when there weren't all the crowds or there weren't, big crew of boarders, like everyone competing to do the best trick of the day. I actually loved being on my own and being on top of a cliff or a big jump and having that battle with yourself. Like, are you going to send it? Are you going to try this or not? So my relationships sort of changed over the years where I really would try and push myself to try and do all the tricks I was watching on the videos, the VHS back in the day. And then eventually I started to realize I didn't like hucking and, the stylish aspect of snowboarding, I started to really appreciate. And that sort of changed actually my appreciation of mountains in general.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one, I guess. There's, and I guess as we went through that transition, especially as the early 2000s and the spin to win became a good thing, which has evolved to a whole different level of double, triple, quadruple, God knows what.
Yeah.
How many spins these days? There was really that time where, much like there is today, people just wanted to see a real steezy, indie, tweaked out 180, not a pencil 720.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I remember what we used to love to do is once the aerial skiers had finished their training, we'd chop down their jump. But it was still so kicky that, it almost forced you into a backy or like a rodeo or whatever. And then I remember this one point when there was a pro from America, Chris Coulthard, and he came down. He was one of the coaches for the squads that I did. And I'd left the squad then. And I was fully into back rodeos and like was getting back rodeo 7s and spinning it round to 9. And then I watched him on this kicker on the aerial jump and he did a double back rodeo. And I was like, fuck, that looks sick. That looks so good. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do next day. So I gave it a crack and almost broke my back on the first one, how steep those landings are. But I actually realized I didn't like the feeling because it's blind, double blind, and then the extra back blind at the end. And I was like, this is not fun. And I saw a video of myself doing it and I was like, okay, like that doesn't look that good. I'm like, why am I trying to do? And I was realizing, okay, what looks great on film isn't fun to do. Yeah. And that changed my snowboarding.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like some people can make it look great, and I think a similar thing happened with skiing a bit later down the track where there was dudes really clinical at laying down epic tricks, but they were copying so much hate online from being, oh, it's too clinical, he's a robot. And then there was people who could do similar tricks or as many spins, but make it look steezy.
Mm.
And there became kind of a bit of a divide there, I guess. And then that's where, I think when it came to movie parts and a whole bunch of other stuff,
Mm.
where people who had great foundations of skiing or snowboarding or racing backgrounds,
Mm.
they get into that comp zone early on and then either stick with it and spin harder, spin faster, try and be the best,
Yep.
or go, I've done that. I want to do movie parts and go ski pep. And I guess, we see similar things still today with a lot of epic surfers and
Mm.
in all sorts of action sports where there's that, do I want to really push the limit with trying to be on tour or be the best to win X Games, or do I want to have fun and make epic movie parts? So, Buller, early on, you kind of got up there, got on a bit of the free ride team, kept honing your art, skating background, got you there. What happened next?
What happened next? Yeah, I think it was funny. I think the year that I stopped riding for the shop and kind of was in uni and I was hating uni, and the only thing that was keeping me happy at uni was actually just like graffitiing every day or every night. And so I hated it. And then bumped into good mate, Steve Versace up at Buller, and we had a beer and he just said to me, "Hey, do you want a job at the bar here?" And I just said yes, because I hated the uni course I was doing. And next day in the bar working together.
Yeah.
And that was my funnest year snowboarding ever.
So you were just up visiting from Melbourne.
Yep. Just a quick weekender with my mate, actually the same mate I started boarding with. And yeah, we just got on like a house on fire. And the first time I'd actually been at Buller without having all that pressure.
Yeah.
And we made a little crew, the captain crew. And it was just the funnest thing, snowboarding every day for fun. And yeah, that was the best season I'd ever had. And it was funny because it was pretty much my last season. After that, I left Australia, went to travel the world a bit. But after that season, I realized I really just wanted to like pursue my art.
Yeah.
And at that time, I just started doing something a bit different. Like I kept it a bit secret because the graffiti fellas I didn't think they'd like it much. It was working with masking tape on the street, and I didn't know anyone else doing it. So I just made up this silly name, Buff Dis, as a bit of a joke because it comes off. And then that started to get quite popular to the point where I was able to travel the world with it.
Yeah. So I guess there was a bit of a thing there with graffiti, especially where using projectors and masking tape. There was a bit of
no projectors.
Yeah, there was a bit of a thing there where it was uncool or frowned upon. Did you spend any other time overseas snowboarding? Were you in Canada?
Yeah, I've been to Canada. So I actually did exchange in Canada in high school.
Yep.
And that was amazing. I was like out in this really small town in northern BC next to this place called Smithers, but like it was called Houston, this tiny town. But the best thing about it was there was a mountain in my backyard on the farm I was on. So I was able to build all these little jumps and get skidoos from the neighbors' boys and just huck into these huge jumps. It was great. It was fantastic. But I went to Canada again a few times with the squad. That was fun. Like, that was great fun. And like, actually the standouts from those trips were probably the skiers, like Chrissy Booth. Yeah, he was classic. Yeah, and Benny Mates and Cooksey and so on. But I think the funny connect is that after that great season in Buller, I left and went via Canada again to like travel the world a bit.
Yep.
And by just coincidence ended up in Whistler.
Yep.
And that's when I bumped into Lukey Trembath and Danny Cass again. Because I'd met them in Buller a few times, and it was just this weird thing where like we met at this street art show in Whistler that was just by coincidence, and it was funny to like have that industry that I was so into and wanted to be a part of for so long, and then I'd just gone so far left into like street art, I guess, when it was getting big. And then it was funny to see them again and have a chat about where we were at.
There's a huge similarity there as someone who grew up in the city as well, in Adelaide, who was really into street art and obviously, as I've said previously, rebelling. I guess street art was always a bit of a escape from the realities and a bit of a rebellion. And then when you go snowboarding or skiing and live on a mountain, you got that similar feeling of being free.
Yeah.
And obviously the thrill of going fast or jumping off a mountain or you might get caught is all kind of interconnected mentally, right?
Well, I think what is interesting is like, for me, the most interesting connection is that meritocracy of like in street art, you build up a new name, a fake name, and then nobody knows who you are. They don't know what ethnicity you are. They don't know how you look. It's all based upon your work.
Your expression.
And then with snowboarding and skating and so on, but like up in the snow, even if you're not the cool kid or it doesn't really matter. It's all like how good you are on the snow, how brave you are, what you can try. And I really appreciated that aspect.
And I guess further to that, it's your creative, especially when it comes to power or drawing lines on a mountain.
Mm.
It's a creative expression, what line you want to do. And I guess as you get better or how you want to, tweak out and shifty your spin and make it look stylish.
It's self-expression.
Yeah. And I guess that's, as you were saying earlier, for you didn't want to throw up a quick tag and spin a 720. You wanted to express yourself artistically in both your art and on the mountains, which is awesome.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, I think that's the thing where like the snow industry that I grew up in really celebrated, snowboarding initially, like the outliers of like the industry itself. Like the funny thing is I remember one of the most memorable boards was the Jeff Brushy board, and he had the graph underneath and the brushy, and I thought that was the most amazing piece of graffiti ever. And then now, when I got older, I'm like, hang on, that wasn't even but it was still, a great piece. But that thing of using your surroundings to express yourself. I think snowboarders, we're sort of always up against it with the traditional industry of skiing. And, if you're a graph writer or a street artist, there's certain ways that you should use architecture or, mountains and so on. And then there's that special element of like, like a Jamie Lynn or like, Travis Rice, even like seeing things that people can't see. I think it's just a connection between it all.
Yeah, and I guess that's where in the early days, your likes of Candide, Kovacs was like a snowboarder, and then
you stole our baggy pants, mate.
Yeah,
and twin tips,
and kind of started going bigger and better and sending it bigger than anyone at that stage.
Look, as much as I like,
still is.
But as much as I rag on like skiing, because you guys were the nemesis back then, the fellas that I skied with would go way bigger than any of the snowboarders and faster. Because I mean, every now and then, like Buller would get like a few internationals and then do a big shoot, like an Oakley shoot or something like that. When Quickie still had money and Rippy did too, like they'd get them in and you'd see the 100-footer, and then you'd see these skiers like on the first test jump, like go another 40, 60 feet across from the landing. And like, yeah, back then that's when like snowboarders were just sort of, getting that 100-foot like range and like, yeah.
Yes, at the end of the day, to make it sound fair, it's kind of physics. You got a bit more surface area. You got 4 edges, not 2. So it does make it easier. And same thing happened in Falls Creek when
the Star Wars, yeah.
Star Wars, you'd end up having the skiers piggying the jumps to make sure it was makeable. That was fine for a lot of time until they were like, yeah, but you can't hit them after. Then the skiers were like, well, you guys work it out yourselves then. So yeah, funny. So let's go into a little bit of how you pivoted into this world. Obviously, Hughes, or Buff This, should I say, has created this background, and we met school pickup, as I quickly mentioned before, and we're sussing each other out. And then, I told him I wanted to do a podcast and told Hugh a bit about my background and how I had lived in Huckleberg for a long time. And we were, he's basically honoured to come here and froth out and have a chat and have a beer and build this epic little garage mural for me. So let's just quickly touch on that, I guess. Do you want to explain what this is that people are looking at behind us and what it was based off? One thing I will say for you is that one thing that is a big part of your art is you've obviously evolved as a full-blown artist as opposed to your initial backgrounds, which is obviously still blowing art, but not a street artist, is a lot of topographic elements to your thing. And I guess that's a bit of your signature telltale sign. So do you want to explain a little bit about that while I grab us another beer?
Yeah, no, sounds good. I'll try and make it quick. So like when I first started with the buff disc stuff, it was really figurative. So I'd like literally like do my hands, like look at my hand, then do a hand in tape on the ground or in the street. And then that idea was just about like, you know, the simplicity of like having a human hand that's making the art and then doing a depiction of what's making the art on the street. And anyway, that was like sort of where I went. And then eventually the tape work got really technical, really detailed. And it was sort of to this point, like maybe it was like 10 years of doing the tape and like doing super detailed work that I got kind of a bit burnt out and wanted to simplify it. So instead of doing something that like we're just impressed because of the detail or the, you know, the ability to look like something else, like a human or an animal or a building, then I just wanted to actually like see if I could make something look really good, but it was simple. And the simplest thing I could think of was just a line. And then, you know, you put lines next to a line, next to a line, you start to develop like a frequency. And so I was just sort of playing with that a bit and start, you know, doing a lot of works that was just sort of abstract, but like really graphic, and got to a point where I actually, you know, started to realize, oh, it looks a bit like, you know, mapping. And so my work now is a lot about, so every wall that I do or paint is generally contour based on that wall's location. And so instead of like, you know, site specific, like reacting to like architectural features, it's about where it is. And so when you told me about like where you live and the mountain, the actual, you know, it is a bit of a figurative change back to like depicting, you know, landscape. But my line work for me is landscape, so that I wanted to make a bit of a piece that can look great visually just on a graphic element or like, you know, the abstract aspect. But if you know what it is, then there's a deeper link to the actual location. Yeah.
And so I guess our initial thoughts when we started talking about this, I was like, yeah, I'd be stoked for you to come and throw something up in the garage. And you were like, I'd be stoked too. I don't want the money, let's just hang out. And I was like, obviously, with the amount of time, the most time apart from Falls Creek, I probably spent more time there, is obviously Huckabah is where I've spent most of my ski seasons. It made sense to try and do something with that mountain range. So I sent you a bunch of pictures for inspiration, and very quickly you picked out the one that you thought made the most sense and you had a vision of. But I guess to lead you to the next bit is from there, the initial idea that we both had was to bring where we are, which is Torquay and Huckabah together. You try and do the Huckabah Mountains with a Torquay topographic.
That's right.
And then you quickly were like, no.
It didn't make sense because even though like my normal practice is to actually do a wall or feature the actual landmass where the wall is on, I figured you're going to be talking about snow, and contouring is actually about mountains most of the time. So that, you know, if you go hiking or whatever, then you can actually see what the steepness of ridges and so forth. So I thought, no, let's actually do a mountain behind it and actually have the contouring over the top of it. So I'm not sure exactly where the valley is, but yeah, it starts, and then as it goes higher, it goes into ridges. But
so I guess if you do know Huckabah, and if you just Google pictures of Huckabah, you'll be able to quickly find this image. It's kind of from like across the valley, and you can see these trees and there's like rivers coming through. But he's kind of placed up like the whole mountain range and done it kind of very close but slightly abstract to what you'd be looking
artistic liberty
to what you'd be looking at. And then obviously the white lines over the topographic map of Huckabah. That's, you know, the origin story of the picture. And now I hope, you know, you all think it's a bit cooler.
Can only hope, eh? I think the funny you're saying that, because another connection that I've had with the art that I like to do is sort of outside in the street and the mountains for like skiing and snowboarding. I think it's such a like privileged and unique point of view that only a certain amount of people will ever get up a mountain, let alone, you know, be good enough to like get other people to pay them to do it, or but even just to have the vantage point.
Yeah.
And looking out like at a sunset over a ridge, like that was my favorite thing in Bulla. Just like end of the day, worn out from boarding, watching the sun over the top of the summits, and it's just I knew that only a small percentage of the population would ever see that. And then it's the same with the art that I like to do. Like, sure, everyone can go to a gallery and sit in a studio and, learn to replicate, portraiture and so on. But when you're, stuck in a ditch next to a train line, or like, hiding in a dumpster in an alley, like just because you're trying to do the art, and then even though maybe one's more picturesque than the other, there's still that really unique point of view that only a few people ever get.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like Australia, those valley views that you get from your Bullers and your Falls Creek and Hoppins.
The double sunsets, yeah.
It's pretty spectacular. Probably you get them as well in the New South Wales mountains, but I've definitely had a lot of epic sunset views in the Australian mountains.
Yeah, so we've got great ones here, but I'll say maybe the best ones I've seen were like actually another connection. I was lucky enough to like fit out a W hotel in Verbier in Switzerland with all my tape work, and then was able to snowboard a bit on the days off as well. But it was a huge project. Took, like 6 months to do when I was living in Berlin and flying back and forth. But the sunsets up there, my God, okay, like that's the pinnacle, I think.
Yeah, so let's quickly talk about that. You, on your world travels after Canada, I believe you based yourself in Germany, but then spent time shredding in Austria when you could get there in between your projects in the streets. Is that right?
Yeah. So so with my wife now, when we just sort of decided to travel and go halfway around the world and meet up in London, and the idea was just let's see how long we can go for, and then maybe a year in each country. And so we went up to Scotland and France, and then lived in Italy for a year, and then then moved to Berlin. But we got stuck there because it's so fun, and
there's a huge street art.
It was the Mecca, yeah. And at that time, like there weren't many people using tape on the street, and so I was able to like really start a little scene there, and I was really lucky because it was just that time where everyone wanted street art.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but were you like hustling hard at that stage? Did you have second jobs, or were you starting to get recognised and be able to make an income out of your street art? Because it's worth saying now that you basically do murals, and we can talk about you've collabed with North Face and a whole bunch of other brands and done designs on jackets and all sorts of cool stuff. But at that point, were you just hustling and doing street art, or were you starting to get into more museum-y type art studio stuff?
Well, yeah, it's funny because when I was in Australia, I'd gotten to a point where I was able to make a living from it, and was lucky enough to sort of have it out there online, so that when that street art craze was getting really popular with like locally Everfresh, but Banksy and New York and Worcester Collective. So then I was able to ride that a bit and was really lucky with that. But when I got to Europe, I thought I'd jump off the boat and everyone would be like, sweet, now come here's the caviar and champagne. No one knew me and I had to start again. So yeah, I did heaps of different jobs over there, but it was great because, I was doing it all the art on the side. And I think, when you don't, almost a bit like the snowboarding or skiing, when you don't have to make a living from it, it's just so natural or authentic.
So you were hustling, trying to get recognized.
But yeah, so I did a show in Italy. It was this great church that this bunch of locals had taken over from the council, like squatted it and then took it over and turned it. It was amazing, like, 14th century frescoes up, and it was great. But I had to get tape to do the show, and I couldn't find enough black tape locally, and then found an online shop in Berlin that had black tape. So I wrote to them, and then they sent 2 huge boxes and told me like, hey, if you ever move to visit Berlin, come see us. So a few weeks later, Sophie and I jumped on the train, went straight up there, and Sophie got a job, thankfully, like straight away as a graphic designer. And then after sort of a year, I was working with that tape shop, and then it became more of a partnership, almost like an agent-artist relationship. And it kind of just took off and was able to live from that. Right time, right place. Lucky, I think.
Yeah, bring it out of retirement. Don't see why not.
Yeah, of course. I'm actually like, I had one day over the COVID period up at Hotham, and it was so strange being back on the board and like with so long in between. And yeah, like, has your relationship with skiing changed over the years in terms of like, did you like always have a pressure point on yourself to get better and better and better? Or did you reach a point where you're like, how do I enjoy this more?
I think especially when I was younger and was like pushing for more sponsorship and free skis and trying to get photos in magazines.
Yeah.
I felt the pressure to hit the airbag and make sure that I was getting photos and doing whatever. But then as probably business and work and not just being a ski bum, but having a more of a professional career, I think at that point when I wasn't spending as much time on snow, I was still happy to take the free equipment and go for a couple of shoots a year. And I had enough basis to know what I needed to do to get a good shot without having to get injured.
Yep.
So I think 100%. Once I got a little bit older and it was a lifestyle and just wanted to be in the mountains, I'd make sure that if I was really busy and I was only on snow 30 to 40 days a season, I'd only be committing 5 or so days to trying to get shots, but I was good enough at working out how to get good shots.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, shooting's great and trying to get photos or trying to progress is great, but it also is stressful. And if you're really trying to progress or learn new tricks and you've got a job and you're trying to balance it all, it becomes a lot. So I guess, yeah, to summarize that, by the time I was really busy more so with snow career, I was more just trying to shred for enjoyment, because there's nothing better than going out there on a good day, hooting and hollering and enjoying the pow, and visual memories are much better than photos. And there's the visual memories and the froth days that I have with a tiny clip here or there because someone pulled out their phone or whatever.
Yeah.
10 times better than the days where I was stressing trying to huck something. And saying that, I still love the adrenaline and I had plenty of good days.
Yeah, the Hollywood jump's still pretty fun next to the chairlift. Yeah, it's funny because when I'm thinking about sort of still have a bit of a look and keep an eye on the industry a bit, but I think back in our earlier days, like there were brands that were they were still sort of there was so much of an identity, and like for me back then, snowboarding was my identity, and the brands that you rode or wore were like so linked to who you wanted to express yourself as. And now it's like funny because I think from just a few steps away looking at the industry, it seems like so much of that soul's been sold. And like I get it, it's business. The owners get old, want to set up their trust funds and so on, but now like that soul core, free surfer, free skier, free boarder, whatever, is for me like I'm so glad there's still that.
Yeah. I guess, sad with you coming from a skating background, we've all seen like the documentaries of the Dogtown
Z-Boys, yep.
And the Z-Boys and all of that, and even the Tony Hawk and the Aussie boys and the spinning.
The Pappas boys, yeah, I used to skate with them in Paran. Jeez, they were crazy, yeah.
Yeah, I think that kind of really, there's a lot of similarities there, especially with the snowboarding side of thing, where people just wanted to keep it core. And, when skier brands started bringing out snowboards, I'm not going to snowboard for a ski brand, they make rollerblades as well. So I think, there's definitely that core vibe with snow, but the industry's changed. And if you really want to, excel in these days, if you've got something and you want to survive, beggars can't be choosers.
I remember those the days when I was sort of coming up, like snowboarding was a legitimate career option.
Yeah.
Like the contract, some of the fellas I knew were like, and they, different tiers, but like still, even just like the lower tiers on groups, but like, 6-figure contracts. And like nowadays, it's a funny one, isn't it? Like I'm really stoked, like Scotty James, I'm so proud. Like,
yeah.
Boy from Melbourne, like finally someone hit that level that was like actually, world class.
Yeah.
And, I was so proud. And like, yeah, we've had other people that were pushing, but it's interesting because now what snowboarding is, I'm not sure if I can relate to it.
Yeah, I guess, that was like a bit of a Scotty's there when you've got Valentino. And from the skiing side, there was so much talent coming out of Jindy.
Yeah.
Russ Henshaw was the one guy who really went for it and pushed the comp side and did really well. But a lot of the there was a lot of people similarly talented at skiing, I guess, especially from that New South Wales area.
Mm.
But a lot of them, pivoted to photography or to being a builder or whatever because it was just too hard. But there was a bit of a golden era there, especially for snowboarding, where people could make money, but it kind of isn't that way anymore. Wouldn't it be great if that came back?
Yeah, hilarious. But
sorry, but don't you think that that's also, we had all these great parks like Star Wars and everything, and along with that kind of, we sound old now, but along with that dying off a little back.
Yes.
Bring back the froth.
Need to find some more venture capital groups that. Oh, it's funny, like with the natural selection stuff that's going on. There's a fair bit of big money allowing that to happen, but I think I see that as a reaction to like where snowboarding was sort of going, like the X Games stuff, where in one hand, sure, you've got to sell the stock boards, you got to, the rental industry keeps everything afloat, and I see, inside the sausage factory, you have to have whatever's working at the time to maintain it. But I agree that the progression that is occurring now is I see it as sort of so incremental and almost becoming that aerial skiing aspect where it's easy to sort of, mark a jump down because, there was a certain thing off axis, whereas like off axis is what is the best thing about, free skiing or modern skiing. So I don't know. I think natural selection, I'm hoping, is that avenue to maintain that, that wonderful, like almost indescribable, hard to grab smoke.
Yeah.
But I guess you still need to have a competition to make it work. So yeah, I don't know.
And as I said, like I think I mentioned this to you briefly before, I felt that having the skiing in it was awesome. It was just unfortunate that conditions weren't epic. And even though the comp was still epic, it kind of fortunately and very unluckily felt a little bit like a glorified free world comp event because the conditions weren't perfect. And even though it was in Alaska, had to be careful when there was icy parts, and a lot of the names that were hyped to be there, like your Sonny Carlsons and your Candides, didn't make it. So it's so hard for things to align like that. And I guess, you see that with the World Surf League where you get best locations in the world, and sometimes it fires, sometimes it doesn't, and that's life.
I was just going to bring that up because like we're in Torquay. Els is a pretty fickle wave, and what I think, there's been so much frustration with the World Surf League because what the core wants to see, the best surfers in the world in the best waves. Yeah. That's simple. Like that's the best thing. And then, that tricky thing of like, how do you make it profitable? And then it is that thing of windows, like. And
the amount of money that it costs apparently to have a longer window.
Of course. And then, yep. And I think maybe, now that, there isn't that huge amount of cash in the industry that there used to be. And like, I guess this is almost, a bit of a war between, the Olympic acceptance and how that's going to manifest in terms of, all the kids getting into skiing and snowboarding now. But maybe when there isn't that need for profit on a contest, then just have it like, okay, this is a pretty good chance to get a good window here. Maybe not everyone can make it, but have a really long window, really bare bones. You don't need like helicopters and stuff now. You've got drones that cost, a few $100.
Yeah. They're really powerful drones. They can like lift the humans back up.
Matt, so what, we're doing Only Friends World Tour?
Yeah.
You and me are the judges?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, that's awesome, Hugh. I think we probably leave it there. We can probably talk later and get into some more of the details with the life and the stories of Buff This at a later stage. But thank you, mate, for meeting me at bloody school drop off.
You're welcome.
Painting an epic mural of Huckabee and topographic, sharing a beer with me, and being here at the start of the ski season in Australia when every other person is bloody busy doing work. How dare they? Because it snowed. So thanks, mate. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Hope you've enjoyed. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, buddy. Thanks for having us on.
And stay frothy. Keep listening.
Yeah, man. Kia Bamba, them have dubs. We play fast, I play slow. Them have flows like nobody knows. Them kill soul, a sound clash and dance all. And mash up stage shows. But some guys don't recognize, I realize. So them have them own style. A long time them they are now, them not just come. And it's been a long while. Them want a piece of the pie. Whole heap of doublet and tune off a buy. Food fi feed them family, that's no lie. Any idiot little sound try fi test them a go die. Them not give up. Look how long them a wait. A full time now them fi get a slice of the cake. No sound fix because them bust through the gate. Through them play a good tune and this a sound the people rate. Them we mash you up. All over the UK, America and JA. People want key a bamba in a dance. Them no business a oh could a friend or foe. Before them play them want them advance. Now go sell out them soul for no diamond and gold. Big house, fancy clothes and car. Kia Bamba sound, you know them are the champion. Micah and Killer be a born stars. Them have tunes and have dubs and have flows like nobody knows. Them kill sound, a sound clash and dancehall and mash up stage shows. But some guys don't realize, I recognize that them have them own style. A long time them they are know them not just come. And it's been a long while. Can't keep them waiting or anticipating. If you this your sound will get slow. Select a Killer B and Mike and a run for kill selector. Them no business at all.